Guys, so I'm trying to explain to you some of the uses of voicing when making some transcriptions when we're talking about derivational suffixes. So you'll recognize this as the exercise 1 in the workshop that you were doing for last week. So this is basically these conjugations of the third person singular. I know that many of you struggle with that topic, and probably in order to look for the answer, you probably cheated using the phonetics thing. Some of you wrote to me and you sounded like really concerned that you maybe didn't understand. So I'm trying to make this video in order to explain a little bit how that works, and also I will add another topic for you to check to see if we can learn a little bit more despite the conditions, the circumstances. So let's start. So remember that when we talk about voicing, we're talking about voiceless and voiced consonants, but I feel that some of you have forgotten that vowels are always voiced. They are always voiced. And consonants, some are voiced and some are voiceless. So that's why it is important to have your chart next to you when transcribing. Remember the chart that we made during the first sessions on our classes? In those charts, you put which consonants were voiced and which consonants were voiceless. So probably you still don't know this by memory. So it is very useful for you to have your chart next to you when you're transcribing so that you can actually do it right, okay? So you need to remember when a consonant is voiced and when it is voiceless. So when we are making a conjugation of the third person, singular, we have three possible cases. In the first case, we're probably going to add the sound s at the end of the verb. So how are you going to find which verbs are those? Well, you need to make sure that you transcribe the verb before making the conjugation. That's why I say here, the verb when not conjugated finishes in the following voiceless consonants. So the verb either finishes in f, k, p, or t. If you see that there are only four voiceless consonants, that is because these are the only consonants that are used at the end of verbs that fulfill this case. So here I have some examples of verbs that finish in that: sniff, take, cap, and put. When they are transcribed into IPA, you see they have f, k, p, and t. Sniff, take, cap, put. Now, when you derive the verbs into the third person singular, this is when you conjugate those verbs. Since the end of this consonant is a voiceless sound, so you need to add another voiceless sound. So you're going to add the s sound at the end. So we have here the transcription for the conjugation: sniffs, takes, caps, puts. The sad part about this one, this is the easier one. However, this is not very common. Because most of the verbs in English actually belong to the second group. In group 2, we have the pronunciation z at the end of the verb when we made the conjugation. So again, you need to check if the verb when not conjugated finishes in any of the following voiced consonants, which are b, d, g, o, n, v. Okay? Or also if they finish in a vowel. So this is the biggest group. Actually, like I'd say that probably 60% of the verbs in the English language, when they're conjugated into the third person, they will follow this rule. So I have some verbs here that finishes in some of these consonants. We have bomb, command, log, call, come, man, sing, alter, bathe, love, and play. So all these verbs, when derived into the third person singular, are pronounced with a z sound at the end. I've told you before that this is a very difficult sound to pronounce because in Spanish we don't have it. It doesn't occur as a strong phoneme. It occurs as a weak phoneme. Usually people who speak Spanish can't listen. I mean, they are unable to listen to this pronunciation when it sounds, and they confuse it with the s sound. So that's why this is so difficult, because this probably goes into your hearing capabilities. So you need to practice a lot in order to be able to listen to this. But I'm trying to exaggerate the pronunciation so that you realize how it sounds. So we have bums, commands, logs, calls, comes, mans, sings, alters, beds, loves, plays. So you see, there are a lot of verbs that go into this group. So you need to be careful with this one, because most of the people who speak Spanish as a native language, they can't pronounce the z sound correctly. If you pronounce these verbs, let's say like bumps or commands or locks with a sound at the end, people will understand you, but they will immediately know that your native language is Spanish. So if you want to have a perfect pronunciation, remember that you need to really practice the z sound. Okay, so I'm going to repeat it for you again. Bumps, commands, logs, calls, comes, mans, sings, alters, baths, loves, plays. And the third case is when the verb, when it is not conjugated, finishes in any of these 5 sounds. So you realize that all of them are fricative sounds, except for these 2 that are the ones that we call affricates. So they are different, and they exist because it is impossible to pronounce 2 s sounds together or 2 z sounds together. So usually the verbs that finish in z, j, sh, s, ch, when in order to pronounce the third person conjugation, it is mandatory for you to add another syllable. So we have amaze, manage, push, dance, and catch. And when you make the conjugation, then you need to add another syllable. And remember that you can add schwa, z, or is. It doesn't matter what you add. The thing is that you pronounce them and that you transcribe them. So amaze, when it is conjugated, it sounds amazes. Manage, when it is conjugated, it sounds manages. Push, when it is conjugated, it sounds pushes. Pushes or pushes. Dance, when it is conjugated, it sounds dances. And catch, when it is conjugated, it sounds catches. So you see that when they're not conjugated, that they finish in this little phoneme, j, sh, s, or ch, or z. And they're conjugated, you add a whole syllable, is. So that's why this is special. Okay, so this is the third case. Why is also this very important? Because this also affects the pronunciation of plurals. So plurals of nouns follow the same rules. If they're plurals that finish in a voiceless consonant, then the plural has a voiceless consonant s at the end. Parts. If the singular form finishes in a voice sound, like thing, the pronunciation of the plural goes things. And if the noun, when in singular, it finishes in any of the 4 sounds that it mentioned before, when you make the derivation into a plural, then you have to add a syllable. So we have branch or branches. So that's basically about plurals. So plurals follow the same rules. So whenever you have to transcribe a plural, you need to take into account voicing as well, so that you make the correct transcription and you pronounce it correctly. And the other case of voicing that is very important is the one about the past tense of regular verbs. Also, this is another common mistake of pronunciation with people who speak Spanish, and actually who speaks many different languages that are not English as their native language. So we have 3 groups as well. They're very similar to the groups of plurals, and they're easier because they have less rules. So in the group 1, when the verb is not conjugated, it finishes in a voiced consonant, except for D, or it finishes in a vowel. So when the verb finishes in a voiced consonant like z, amaze, when you turn it into the past tense in the regular area, you will pronounce amazed. Okay, and when it finishes in a vowel, the same. Play, played. This is very simple. The group 2 is when you're going to add a t at the end. So when the verb not conjugated finishes in a voiceless consonant except for T, you're going to add a T at the end. So we have the verb place, it finishes in S. This is a voiceless consonant, so you add a T, placed. And finally, the special case is when the verb finishes when not conjugated in a D or in a T. So in that case, you're going to add another syllable. So we have command. In order to make the past tense, you're going to add a complete syllable. So you have command, and in the past tense, you have commanded. And in the case of a verb finished in T, we have accept. And when we have the past tense, we have accepted. So this third case is not very common. Actually, the two most common cases are either group 1 or group 2. And we make an emphasis on this because sometimes people pronounce incorrectly something like amaze it or play it, or in this case maybe place it. So it's important that you don't pronounce the written E. That's why we have amazed and played and again placed. The weird ones are the ones where you pronounce the it or the it, whatever you want to pronounce it, in the case of commanded and accepted. So I want you to keep this in mind. When we have an exam, probably I will ask you to make some transcriptions for these derivational suffixes. I really hope you understand what I'm trying to tell you. I'm going to upload this video to YouTube, and also I'm going to upload this video to the platform of the university. Remember, whenever you have a question, feel free to ask via WhatsApp. So thank you very much for paying attention to me, and see you around.